Hey, David Brewster here with another episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Pantera. And of course, we're talking about Dimebag Darrell here. And this is Metal Month, so I figured, Pantera definitely fits into the theme for this month. And we're going to be looking at, hard rock and metal guitarists throughout the month of October. And Pantera, of course, is a legendary group, that definitely rose in popularity in the late 80s, and then they just literally exploded in the 90s. And Dimebag's a very respected, and just his memory and his legacy lives, and obviously the music lives on today too. And there's been a lot of focus and talk about his over-the-top lead ability and his shredding and licks, and I did make a three-for-all based around Dimebag Darrell, and this is Chordplay, so we're going to look at his chords. And he did a lot of power chord work, mutant power chords and some of the kind of flipped or inverted power chords that we recently looked at in the Metallica Chordplay. And I thought about, channeling and kind of targeting some of that. But then as I started really kind of going back and listening and reworking and learning, some of this material, I thought, no, Dimebag definitely is no chord, slouch. He had a huge vocabulary of chords, and you could pick up, little pieces like, hey, I think I know where he might have, found that chord or snuck this chord in, to a progression somewhere. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can learn from him for sure. Now, for some of you watching this, you may not realize, but Cowboys from Hell is not Pantera's first album. That's kind of typically misunderstood, but really Pantera existed and thrived long before Cowboys from Hell. And I made this chart here just to kind of recommend, some of those early, Pantera albums. The song that opened this episode, you may not recognize that if you're not familiar with early Pantera, kind of the hair metal or, 80s rock version of Pantera. And that was a song called Over and Out, which is from their power metal album from 1988. And I chose that mainly just to kick this off, in a different area, and maybe expose, some of those earlier recordings and songs to viewers out there, because some of you are fully aware, and then I guess some of you probably have no clue. And it's like, wait a minute, what? There's music before Cowboys from Hell? But yeah, there is. It's a little different. I mean, it's not the Pantera that we all know and love. It's the same band, but the music and the style is a little different. So with Over and Out, he's really just kind of flirting with an E power chord and like an E minor 6. You could also think of that as a raised fifth or implying augmented right there. And as far as the picking for that, because there is that kind of barrage of open E strings, and I found almost like the riff from Tell No Tales from TNT, which I broke that down recently too. With that riff, we started it with an upstroke and then began an open A string with a downstroke. And I found myself kind of approaching this riff the same way, where we're going to hit the E power chord with an upstroke and then start the barrage of open E's with a down, slowly like this. And then after that, there's like this little single note run, and this is really tricky. It's actually a good workout or a warm-up or an exercise you can play with. So that's the first lick, or the first riff. So you start with the chords. And go right back to the chords again. And then the second time through, he extends that little single note riff. And then he starts doing this descending power chord movement, and it reminds me of Megadeth. Actually, this song kind of reminds me of Megadeth, like the way it sounds and the way it's put together. But this definitely kind of reminds me of Megadeth a little bit, old school Megadeth. Something like that. that. The next idea comes from Cemetery Gates, and this is one of my favorite, Pantera songs. And I learned this a long time ago, and I've shown it to students. I've actually even played this in a few, bands or garage bands or whatever. And I really like the chord progression. And, songs like this and a few other ones that I've selected here, it really does reveal Dimebag's kind of playful side with chords, because, whenever I work on the music from a certain musician or guitarist, when I start looking through their material and I start looking at how they put things together, sometimes you can actually see the playful side of a musician just from the chords that they kind of frame or put together in a song. And this is one of those tunes where you can see like a little bit of chord play, kind of hiding. And, I don't really know, like maybe Dimebag just heard it in his head and he found it and that's the way it was supposed to be played. Or maybe he sat there and just kind of played around with it and kind of carved out this riff. So I'm not really sure. I mean, and unfortunately he's not, around. We can't ask him, where did you come up with these chords? But I'm guessing he probably just kind of played with the shapes and played with the fingerings and found this progression. So it starts off with an F sharp minor 7, which we're going to do kind of a traditional shape like that. So we're barring. We're not really going to worry about the high E string up there. And then once we've picked through that F sharp minor 7, it's going to go to an A sus2. And then an E5, which we're going to basically use a lot of open strings here. Like that. Right here, you can actually see a little bit of that chord play in action, because your index finger that's holding the 2nd fret on the D is going to relocate to the 2nd fret on the B, and that's going to create a D major 13. But visually, we're just moving one finger, to another string. Something like that. So you put those 4 chords together and just start arpeggiating through them, you'll have something like this. The second time through, he picks that D major 13 a little different. But it's, really, really expressive and interesting chord progression. I've always liked that. The next example comes from the song Sleep, which is also from Cowboys from Hell. And it starts with this really stretchy and interesting, it's an A minor add 11. Like that. And it's actually the first chord in Joe Satriani's Tears in the Rain from The Extremist. And I have a hunch, I could be wrong, but I have a hunch that Dimebag probably stole this from Joe Satriani. I'm just totally guessing here. But Joe Satriani actually had a series of articles that were in Guitar World magazine, and he transcribed Tears in the Rain. I think it was like in '87, which would have been before Cowboys from Hell, and technically I think it was before the Extremist album too. But he did transcribe and show that to Guitar World readers. And I know Dimebag, was a huge guitar, encyclopedia, basically. I mean, he was a walking metal encyclopedia. So this is my own little hunch here. I could be totally wrong. But I think this actually came from Satriani, Tears in the Rain. So the chords are really creepy. I love this progression. So there's that A minor add 11. And then it's going to move to a D minor add 9. Which is right there. And then right there, in part of that D minor add 9, he introduces the flat 9 right there, that E flat, which is really, pretty gross. Because you're hearing, the high E string, you're hearing E flat, and it's technically a D chord, so you're kind of hearing this, cluster of notes in there. But I really like that progression. So he plays through that a couple times, and then it's going to relocate to an A minor sharp 11, which is really bizarre. And then to make things even weirder, then these two fingers, the middle and the pinky, are going to switch places. And now you're holding the 5th fret on the D and the 7th fret on the G. And this creates a really controversial chord as far as naming the chord. That is very ugly and very, dissonant. And it's one of those chords, as you start kind of mutating and playing with chords and you start reworking, fingerings and shapes, you're going to run into situations like this where you're going to sit there and think, okay, well, what is the name of this chord? That's not normal at all. And once again, there's this little chromatic, location right here where you've got D, technically E flat, and E natural. So there's 3 chromatic notes right in a row right there, which is so bizarre, but it's so cool. I would call that an A7 sharp 11 sus4, and that's a crazy chord. And if there's some musical, scholars out there and you want to argue with me, go right ahead, because good luck, trying to figure out what is this chord. And the real problem is that part, where we have the D, E flat, and E natural all together. It's perfect for horror movies and stuff like that. But it does create kind of a strange, situation as far as identifying what that is. So there he's played through, those 2 chords. And then he basically starts going through their B diminished 7th chords over A. So you can kind of think of that diminished shape right there. And the second time through, he starts climbing up those B diminished 7 over A, chord shapes. But I really like that intro part, and the chords are unusual and different. Really cool guitar part. Alright, as you can see, I changed guitars, mainly because we've changed tunings. And the next example is from this Love, which is from Vulgar Display. And when you move from Cowboys to Vulgar, you'll notice you're going to go from standard tuning to a half step down. The next 2 examples are both going to be tuned a half step down. And then the last example is going to be tuned even lower. But I'll give you a heads up, when we get there. But with this Love, you're basically playing 2 sets of these kind of mutated chords. You're kind of implying an F sharp minor 7 once again. A little different than the one we had in Cemetery Gates, but it's just a piece of that chord. So you're just playing F sharp, C sharp, and E right there. And then you're going to add a G right here on the 3rd fret on the low E. The exact same thing over a set of strings. Now you're going to play a B minor 7 and then a B minor 7 over C. And then he starts playing like a little piece here of like a C sharp diminished and then a little piece of C. And then it's like a little piece of A over C sharp. Right here, you're going to play an E5 over G sharp, and then the very last chord he plays is an A minor, but it's fretted and played this way, which is unusual, but I really like that chord. That little transition there between that E5 over G sharp to A minor, and It's a nice little resolution right there at the end. The next example is from the song Hollow, and this starts with an A minor add 9. We're going to be right here. You got the 2nd fret on the D and the 5th fret on the G. And then just add a C right there, and it changes it to a C major 7. So right there we're just kind of moving, you know, changing one note. And then play a G there on the 3rd fret and the low E, and then that's a C major 7 over G. And then go back to that A minor add 9. And then repeat again. And the last time through, once again, kind of a chord play moment. You see this, you know, kind of shift to this, which that's really strange. That's going to be a B minor flat 9 over F sharp. You know, really ugly chord, but I love it. Really sick chord progression, but I like those kind of chords. They're moody and dark and mysterious. Really, it's beautiful. The last example here comes from the song Floods, which is from the album Trendkill, or The Great Southern Trendkill. And it's funny how Pantera fans typically refer to the albums just with one word, you know, Cowboys or Vulgar or Trendkill or whatever. And I think that's funny. But anyway, this song is tuned down 1.5 steps. So your low E string is actually going to be a C sharp. So we're way down there. And then I guess all the way across there you'd have C sharp, F sharp, B, E, G sharp, and C sharp again. So the entire guitar is tuned down 1.5 steps. And the very beginning, it has this very sinister, kind of creepy chord happening here. And that's technically, what, a C sharp minor sharp 11, and then a C flat 13. Now on the track, you can hear there's like a slight flanger, I believe it is. Very slow, you know, modulation. But you hear it kind of warp the chord a little bit. And if you try playing along with the song, it has this, you know, kind of chorusing effect, even though it's technically a flanger. But it's going to make you sound like, you know, either Dimebag's a little out of tune or you're a little out of tune, you know, trying to play with them. So it kind of masks, you know, how dissonant and ugly that chord actually is. That's ugly. Basically just cruises down. There's that E over G sharp again, and then there's basically, I guess you could think of that as like an E5 over G, and then just an E power chord. But the part that happens right after that is the part I really wanted to get into here. So here's a C sharp minor 9 to an A minor add 9. And there you're going to basically move up to an E add 9. And then the last chord here, this is an F sharp 6 add 9 add 11. So once again, kind of an oddball chord. And that's basically how I've identified that chord. An F sharp minor 6 add 9 add 11. You know, complicated, but it's simply just taking that, you know, E add 9 and moving it up to F sharp. I love that chord progression. It's real dreamy and has this spacey kind of atmospheric sound. So course, the outro of Floods has the very famous, add nine. I guess you could also think of those as sus2 chords, but that kind of melodic outro that's, just beautiful. I love how he's just kind of piecing those together. And of course, I first became aware of those from Message in a Bottle, by the Police. Which sounds hilarious, tuned down 1.5 steps like that. That doesn't even sound like the Police anymore. Of course, he starts kind of mutating and weaving those ideas around, but that's a classic, guitar outro, and I love those chords and that progression too. Going to wrap this look at chords from the late great Dimebag Darrell and of course the band Pantera, and I'm a big fan, definitely. I always respected him and loved Pantera's music, and as soon as they kind of just blew up, I was like, who is this crazy guy from Texas? It's so refreshing, and it was so much impact and power and energy, and this kind of almost childlike, kind of playful side to his music too, because he was obviously brutal and serious and focused, but he also played around, almost like a teenager would, but he was an adult, an adult male, rocking the streets or moshing the pit or whatever he was doing. But you could definitely see, he loved music, he loved the guitar, he loved, Ace Frehley and Eddie and Randy Rhoads and the gang. I mean, how could you not like Dimebag Darrell? It's like he's, a guitar landmark, that everybody should visit, him and his music and try to absorb and, learn whatever they can, because it's really rare to have a player like that. That only comes around, every so often. Like Jimi Hendrix or somebody. It's just like, wow, okay, exceptionally talented and a great person too. I mean, a human being under all the licks and riffs and pinch harmonics and everything. I mean, he had a heart too, which is great. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments, and please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back with more material and lessons very soon. Thank you.